Hello and welcome to The Rabid Atheist. I'm Ed Ravey, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Welcome to Tuesday Deconverters Bible Study. Today I'm continuing on our Bible study, Heroes of Faith, where we're looking at Hebrews 11. We are asking what makes these people heroes according to the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 11. And today we're looking at Hebrews 11:23. This is where it says, "By faith Moses' parents hid him 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict." To sum up the story referred to, which you can find in Exodus 1:1 through 2:10, the Israelites have been living in Egypt to a point that nobody remembers Joseph. Because the Egyptians are fearful of the Israel's size and their continuing to grow, the Pharaoh gives an edict to kill the baby boys in the Israelite camp. There's several things that happen. The midwives create some concocted scheme to, allow certain baby boys to survive because they were supposed to be killed right at the moment of birth. And so we have this situation where baby boys are still being allowed to live because the midwives say, Hebrew women give birth too quickly before they can even get there. Pretty obvious lie, but, we'll run with it. And in desperation, Moses is one of these women that has her baby, quote unquote, early before the midwives get there. And Moses hides her child, Moses is hid for 3 months. And then, Moses' mother gets to a point where, what do I do now? Because sooner or later they're going to find the baby boy and kill him. So she builds a little basket thing and coats it with waterproofing and floats it down in the Nile River, and sends Miriam to watch it. The baby is discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who keeps the baby, and so Moses lives and escapes the death sentence of Pharaoh. So the writer of Hebrews is using this story as another example of someone who had promises they never saw fulfilled, but they still believed in. In this case, Moses' parents are the subject of being heroes of faith. Okay, one of the problems I have in general with using this story by the writer of Hebrews is there's not really a lot mentioned about Moses' father. Okay, it's pretty much a story that focuses on Moses' mother. He's not really active in the story, but somehow he gets hero of faith status as if he was active in the story, but he's not. In addition, this is pretty much an act of any decent parent who in that situation, all you really have left is an act of desperation. There's tons of stories from mythology and real life where human beings are shown to do something like this to try to preserve their children in the face of death. So I don't think it's all that unique in a sense as a story. The text says that they did it because he was a special child in Hebrews, but when you read the text of Exodus, it just says he is a fine child. In other words, he's a good-looking kid in good health, and so they're trying to, it's like she's trying to say, why would you want to kill something like that? And that is pretty much true. I mean, there's always this wonderful romantic notion in most births that the child is special and he's going to grow up to be something great. And so this is a very normal human parental attitude, okay? And any decent person would do this. It's not a special action, in my opinion, of any type. It's an act in a desperate time, which doesn't always come around. But it's something that, I would have done, my ex-wife would have done with any one of our kids. We would have worked to preserve them. It's not any kind of special thing. It also doesn't take into account that probably a lot of the Hebrew and the women in the story have been also trying to save their children. And so when I look at this story, is it really an act of faith or is it really dumb luck that Moses just happens to be the one that finds the Pharaoh's daughter? From a story point of view, if it was true history, which I don't think it is, and it has no evidence that it is a true story. If it was a true story, it's really basically dumb luck that, we're just seeing a person retconning the idea that Moses was a special kid because he just happened to be the one found by the Pharaoh's daughter. The writer of Hebrews is kind of motivated by this act that he's a special child, but the text doesn't really say that. And every parent might make their assessment of their own kid that they're special. In the end, Moses' parents are doing what any normal parents would do, is hoping for the best, and they just happen to get lucky. But for this typical act of many parents would not become heroes of faith. They would just be considered normal parents, loving parents in a desperate situation. It does, in a sense, have a sense of courage to it, but no more or less than any other parent that would be in the same position. But the story also leaves a lot of parents out of luck, who either had to have their children preserved through the midwives' actions or didn't happen at all and they ended up killed. So, tough luck for them, huh? Now, at this point, I always love it when theists try to defend God later, saying that when he kills the firstborn of Egypt, it's vengeance for this act. The question I have at that point is, why couldn't have God saved the baby boys in the first place? Why does God want vengeance rather than the preservation of life? Why does he, do that? It's a subject that comes up whenever this text is dealt with. I would also conclude then at that point, either God doesn't care when they're first killed, or it's all part of their plan to die in the first place so that he has a motive for vengeance later. I mean, we're talking about the God who's, omniscient, right? Where he knows all of the things that are going to happen. So he knows he's going to do this plague on Egypt. And so it's all really part of his plan that all these baby boys die in the first place. So he might as well have been killing themselves. He's just standing in the corner like he always does and watching horrible things happen and not doing anything about it. And I would say that if killing infants is part of your plan, you're not really all that superior as a God, and you don't really have that good of a plan. In any case, Moses' parents get credit here in Hebrews 11 for doing something that any parent would do. It's a mundane, natural human behavior that somebody gets exalted for, and in this case, the writer of Hebrews exalts them for it. It kind of fits his purpose. He's writing to a time in Christian history where the first generation of Christians is left. When you look at the New Testament this way and you realize that there's books that are written while, like, Paul and some of the apostles would supposedly be alive, and then there are books that are obvious, either forgeries or later works by somebody else we don't know, like the writer of Hebrews in this case, where Christianity has passed its first generation, and the promises of Jesus that this generation will not pass away. So there are some sitting here that will not taste of death until they come, which the writer of John tries to get past, with his ending. Well, that's not what he said. He didn't say that we would live until his return, but that what if I decreed that he live until my return? What's that to you? And that is not what he says in the early Gospels. So it's a definite. The writer of John is definitely in the mode of, Jesus didn't fulfill his promise, so we got to figure out how to change the promise so that we can get past that. So in a very similar way, the writer of Hebrews is facing the issue of people leaving the faith, in particular Jewish people leaving the faith. That's why he writes so much with so much Old Testament references and stuff like that, because he knows that the Hebrew believers would know all that stuff. So what's he doing here? He's trying to appeal to parents. Just like a parent looks to a child and has a lot of hope for their future, is the same way that we should look at faith in Christ, that we should still look forward to this wonderful, glorious future, even though it doesn't seem like it's come about the way Jesus and, if you want to throw John the Baptist in there and Paul said it would happen. All three of those individuals claim that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's going to happen very, very soon. And Jesus makes his predictions about, this generation will not pass away. There's some that won't taste of death, which John tries to change and alter in order to fit the reality of the situation, which is that didn't happen. And you have Paul preaching this resurrection of the dead that's very imminent because Jesus is the first fruits. And so the writer of Hebrews is faced with this task of, okay, we got all these Jewish believers leaving the faith, so let's write a chapter, although he wouldn't have divided. So let's write this part in my book where we have all these people who didn't receive the promises but stayed faithful to the end. And he's trying to pass it off, as something, that they should do now, okay, that we should continue to believe in the gospel even though some of the promises have not come to pass. And in fact, some of the promises are straight up false prophecy, but we'll not get into that. So he uses Moses' parents as one more example. The problem is, it's not very equivalent because any parent will look at their child and see the potential of the child if they're any kind of decent parent. Okay? And so it's not the same as a promise given by a religion of some future event like the resurrection for which there's no evidence. Because at least with children, there's the evidence that sometimes a kid turns out, more often than not, to be a decent human being. And sometimes some children go on to great things. So you actually have some evidence that having faith in your child sometimes pays off. But we have this promise of Christianity that hasn't paid off at all at the end of the first generation. And it should have. It should have, based on what Jesus said. Okay? Now, in deconverting, because this is the Deconverters Bible study, what does this do for us? I think one of the things that I have tried to emphasize with this Bible study series in particular is that a lot of the later writers of the New Testament are faced with a situation where people are leaving the faith because the promises of this early Jesus cult are not fulfilled. It's like when you have these cultic leaders that predict the end of the world, and then they get to the day that they predicted it on, it happens, the world doesn't end, and now you have to justify continued belief in the cult because it didn't happen. And it's no different than that. And that's the thing you realize is when you're deconverting and you're getting past these stories, right? That a lot of these stories are written in response to a situation at the time, and this is a good example of the writer of Hebrews trying to use parents and the parental instinct to keep people in the faith. And it's not that special. It's really actually quite mundane. It's mundane what the parents do in the sense that I think a lot of parents would do what Moses' parents did as a last act of desperation of trying to keep their child alive, okay? And just happened to get dumb lucky that it's where Pharaoh's daughter and her maidens bathe, the basket floats into that area. It might not have been dumb luck if you simply know the way currents roll and where Pharaoh's daughter and her maidens are bathing, then you just kind of put it upstream a little bit and just let it float down. But that might have been the plan all along. Who knows? So in deconverting, this kind of demythologizes the story a bit of the whole Moses thing. And once again, I must reiterate that the Pentateuch has zero historical evidence for it. Okay, it's not there. There's nothing in Egypt. There's nothing in the Sinai Peninsula that indicates wanderings. Nothing. Okay, the lack of evidence is more embarrassing than the lack of evidence for who wrote the Gospels, and that's pretty embarrassing. So this story being used by the writer of Hebrews to keep people in the faith, that's his goal. And if you're deconverting, and you're leaving the faith, how many times have I've lost track of the amount of times that I've been approached, if you only had the real Christianity, if you only had heard the real gospel, if you only had, and all these people keep trying to appeal to me to get back into the faith. And it happens to me a lot. And I'm sure many of you deconverting have experienced the same thing. It's going to happen. The question you have to ask it, is this the reason, the rationale for me returning to their faith, an actual proof of the claim? Or is it just appeals like this, using mundane things to get you back, getting you to have this desire, this wishful thinking, getting you trying to engage in this wishful thinking? Because that's what the writer of Hebrews is trying to do. He says you still have to believe in this wishful thinking of the resurrection of the dead. Even though the founder of the movement, his predictions didn't come to pass the way he said, although John tries to fix that, but it still creates a problem because now we see that he tried to fix it, with all that going on. And so you begin to look at the New Testament a little bit differently, and you can say, okay, when was this book written? When, and who was it written by? And you start to ask that because it becomes a very important question, because now you have books of the Bible written, 70, 80 AD. Well, this is after the first generation, and so the tone of those books is, hey, don't leave the faith. Don't get slack in your coming back and staying with the faith, because it's going to pay out in the end, with a claim that you can't prove will ever pay out in the end. And so when people appeal to me to come back into the faith, they often use mundane ideas like that. I think the most common for us deconverting is this notion of, for me it's like, well, you want to see your father again. Now, it's a very powerful emotional appeal to me because I loved my father. But what is the reality of the claim that allows me to see my father again? The answer is there is no reality to that. Okay, and it's just wishful thinking. It's just me being wishful thinking and trying to get me back into the mode of wishful thinking. And I won't do that. Okay, I'm not going to wishful think anymore. And so, 20 years ago that might have appealed to me, but not anymore. Okay, so what you have here is, to me, it's kind of an act of desperation of the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 11. He's trying to desperately throw out all these people that should have caused you to want to stay in the faith because, they were people that didn't receive the promises either, but believed in something far off. And it's a nice appeal, but it's an appeal to err. Okay, there's no proof of the promise, and there should be a proof of the promise. And there really isn't. And when you consider the fact that when you look at a lot of the stories he's drawing for could not have happened, it makes it even more of a bogus appeal based on the ignorance of the time. And, it's getting past all that, friends, that, of looking at the Bible as for what it is, a human work, that different writers of different books have different agendas, okay? And those agendas are often more about keeping the faith of Christianity together, especially in the New Testament, when things are starting to unravel. You can see that they're trying to hold things together in the end when things are starting to unravel. And then by the time it gets to the 2nd century, okay, Christianity has become this organization that pretty much ignores the prophecies of its founder, other than to say, oh, well, it still could happen someday, and you need to get in on this deal for eternal life. And the sales pitch and the cultic nature of it continue. So that's kind of my take on this one. I think it's really mundane that parents would want to save their kids. Okay, I don't mean that. I'm not saying it's not a courageous thing, and I'm not saying it's not special in the sense that, a human parental love for their kids, is going to be important. But it happens all the time, okay, in different ways and forms. And so it's not really that big of a deal. And that's not looking for the promise of some eternal life. That's just looking at a child and saying they have a lot of potential when they're a baby, right? And we've seen kids grow up and become great people and good people. And so, we want to preserve that. So there's that. And I think it's just an appeal to the emotions of people that are parents, okay? And it needs to be treated as such. But as always, this is the Deconverters Bible Study, and so the comments are always welcome. So fire away in the comments section, but I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. And, thank you for stopping by. I thank everybody for their likes, share, and subscribes. That really helps the channel. Other ways you can help the channel is, super chat, super thanks are always welcome by me. Thank you very much for those. If I miss you somehow, know that that's appreciated. But becoming a member is one of the best ways to support any YouTube channel because it's direct support month after month. So that content creator doesn't have to worry as much about the YouTube algorithm and can start focusing more and more on doing the things that they like to do and what you like to see. So being a member and minimal level membership in the Rabid Nation is $2, and it makes you a citizen with all the perks and rights thereof. If you want to buy some more rights and privileges, you have to pay more money, but that's pretty much true in every nation. So also, just sharing it with your friends and, hey, come take a look at this. I think, I recently did my heart good. I had one of my newer fans share their stuff on Facebook that this is something that you should follow, and it did my heart a lot of good. Me and Tim Mills both got that, and it was a good, wonderful, heartfelt moment. Thank you very much. But also, just doing what you guys do. I appreciate everything you guys do, and continue to do that. And because of being members, I want to give a shout out to my members, to my citizens, to my rabid citizens, and to my Tribunes. Thank you very much. You guys' continued support really motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing. So thank you very much. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. And so you don't want to be wasting your time, your money, and opportunities on the trappings of religion and faith, but rather you would probably want to give them to yourself, to build yourself up, to build up the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.